Who says Armor Core doesn't have some sick graphics? These explosions and VFX are epic. Hey Ravens, with over 100 hours in the game, we've learned a couple things and I want to share them with you. In this video, I will break down what all these icons mean and how I discovered that there are actually 4 damage types and what this means for resistances and counter PvP builds in the future. So let's go ahead and jump into our data sheet here. We have a nice little infographic explaining all the icons. And so we're going to start with the far left column, which in this case, it's a bullet. You'll see these 4 icons in the top center of your data sheet for any weapon if you go into the extended view, or it'll be in the bottom center if it's in the reduced minimized mode. But so this far left column represents the damage type, and so there are 4 damage types, and I actually realized this when I was making this infographic that coral was a different one, so we'll get to that in a moment. But for starting with the kinetic, it just looks like your regular bullet, so that's just kinetic damage. Some of the examples are the linear rifle, Gatling gun, stun gun. Resistance is obviously just kinetic resistances. So that's kind of how you handle those kind of weapons. Explosive, or your grenade launcher, missiles, and they always usually have a decent sized radius. So sometimes even if you're close, you'll get hit by them. So that looks like a missile. That's a little missile icon. Next we have energy damage. This is energy rifles, plasma cannons, pulse blade. It's got all 3 of these. They're all just energy damage. So you just anytime you're gonna have one of those, it looks like kind of like this little shell that has an outer ring to it. That is the energy damage. Now, I originally thought coral damage was actually just energy as well, or maybe it was a mix of like energy and kinetic or energy and explosive. And to find out how the resistances work, I looked into it a little bit more, but just the icon itself, it's got those little wavy lines in the center of that round. So we learned that energy and coral are different. So this posed the question, what is the best resistance to coral? So I turned to my trusty partner in crime, Physics, who actually played Armor Core 2, 3, and 5 with growing up as kids. We had a blast playing those games. And in fact, he actually made some legacy corporate logos of Mirage and Crest. You can see those, and the share IDs are in the description below. So if you want to play with those, feel free. He loves to share those. But anyways, we were able to test out a bunch of different armor sets to uncover what the best defense for coral is. And honestly, there is no good defense. Coral actually does true damage and has true impact too. It doesn't have an accumulative. The accumulative always equals the base impact. So stat-wise, these can be pretty scary, especially against tank units who think, oh, I have all these resistances, coral shouldn't impact. Well, guess what? It does true damage. Now, with that being said, coral weapons do not go through pulse armor shielding or physical armor, as in the Juggernaut, as shown on the screen. So that's one thing to definitely consider as you're going through there. And another thing to note is that coral weapons don't benefit from the energy weapon specialization stat in your generator. So if you want a fast charge up, you'll have to stick with EN weapons because coral charge will stay the same no matter what. And some of these coral weapons have huge charge times, so that kind of makes sense. Anyways, so that is the far left column number 1. So we're going to move on to column number 2, which is left inside column, and that is the weapon type. I think it's really just what weapons kind of correlate with that icon. I will be honest, some of these just don't quite match. So if we look at like missiles, that always matches well. Melee weapons always have this icon. I think it's the pile driver. Shields always have this icon, but then the general weapon icons are kind of weird. Like we have this long barreled looking like a rifle. We've got laser cannons, linear rifle, but then we have laser pistol. I don't know how that fits in there. I thought maybe it was weight. I couldn't find that. Maybe reload mechanic, because we've got like a machine gun kind of icon right here. I thought it was machine gun, assault rifles, Gatling gun. That seems kind of weird that it's in there, because maybe if it was by size. Gatling gun's one of the heaviest weapons out there, so that didn't make sense. And even this pistol looking one, it was the grenade launchers in it. So I think there's a lot of I don't know. I'm not sure if there's any use in theirs. If you guys know of what these are useful for, feel free to give us some comments in the below explaining what the usefulness is of that. But yeah, so let's go and move on to column number 3, which is the fire or reload mode, reload mechanic. And there's 3 of them. So you have a single shot, which is grenade launchers and missiles. This is just, you click once, it's going to unload. If it's a missile launcher, it's going to unload all its missiles. It's going to shoot its 1 grenade, and then it's going to go into its reload mechanic. So that's just the one and then reload. You do have overheat weapons, like the Gatling gun, or EN weapons, like the laser pistol, where you'll shoot until it gets too hot, and then it triggers. And it's always cooling until it reaches max overheat, and then it has that 1 second delay before you can actually then reuse that shoot, or then it has to fully cool off, and then you can start shooting again. So that's the overheat weapons. And you got magazine weapons that have it, your typical mag, a certain amount of rounds in there. You shoot them all, and then it needs to reload. I will want to point out one that's interesting is the linear rifle. It actually has the magazine icon, regular reload, but it actually has an overheat mechanic as well. And I've ever heard other members saying that they just spam the charge attack from this weapon. It's the best way to use it. And I would agree to some extent, but you have to charge your attacks sparingly. Either let the weapon cool off for a second or 2 before you start firing again, or shoot 3 charged shots back to back and then unload the rest of the clip as normal to let it cool off in a decent fashion. Or some combination of that, or shoot, then let it cool off, shoot again. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but if you just spam charge attacks, that actually will just overheat all the time. And even when you're just shooting normal, it will actually lock it as well. It won't cool off. It won't go higher if you just shoot regular shots, but it will just hold steady. So that is one thing to consider with the linear rifle. Moving on to the 4th and last column, number 4 right here is status effects. You can see it has a pretty unique icon. These are relatively different. Each one has a different ailment that it can cause. So these weapons have cool abilities. So the first one is ACS failure. So this is to do with heat weapons like the napalm launcher, flamethrower, where they'll increase impact damage, making it easier to stagger that enemy or stagger yourself if they're using it on you. And in this clip, we were testing out how a handgun performs before and after your ACS is either overloaded with that ACS failure from overheating. And so you could see at the beginning we shoot, you get this amount of stagger from that initial shot. And then after the flamethrower heats you up, we get into that ACS failure. We let the stagger go all the way down. Then we shoot again, and now you can see that it's almost about 1.5 to 2x more impact damage. Now it's hard to calculate because it's difficult to see, but you can see it's a significant gain. I'm not sure if it's quite strong enough, but maybe with a bigger weapon that has a larger impact in general or larger cumulative impact, maybe it could be a better way to move. Now, moving on to the next icon, we have this one with the chest crossed out. This is AC Abnormality or Shock, and this can do some pretty nasty damage. If you have a couple of stun guns or the shock needles, you light those up, and it's going to build up the yellow bar that you'll see in the bottom of your screen. And once that builds up to max, you get a big chunk of damage. It's pretty scary when it hits you. It also stuns you for a moment, and it can be pretty deadly. And a lot of people are using that in PvP right now. But there are some counters. So the first thing we discovered was that shock damage is a flat 1600, and it's pure. So no resistances help or true damage. You're a tank with a whole bunch of resistances. It doesn't matter. The shock's gonna hit you, and it's gonna eat your AP. But the shock weapons are kinetic, so you could wear some kinetic armor to mitigate their base damage, but the real stuff comes from that shock. So luckily, it doesn't receive a multiplier when you're staggered, or it would be absolutely busted. The shock amount also decreases with distance. So if you're fighting against a shock enemy, keep your distance and it'll mitigate the damage. You got the stun guns, which are really short range anyways, and then you've also got the stun needles, which you can dodge the further you are away. So just keep your distance and you should be able to beat those weapons. Now, the most important thing, though, is to have this head equipped. Yeah, you're going to look like an alien, and I love it. All right, I live for it. I like looking like an alien, but system recovery directly mitigates the growth of all status effects and can be the difference of 1 clip from 2 stun guns or 2 full clips and a needle from the stun needler. So keep this in mind. There is a chance to beat these shock builds if you build correctly. The last icon is this camera disruption one. You can see it's just the head that's crossed out here. A little bit hard to see, but yeah, camera disruption, lock-on failure. There's only one weapon that does that. It's the jamming bomb launcher. The jamming bomb launcher, when fired, it will create a smoke screen that will affect enemies and will make them blind until they get out of the cloud. or will be unable to target you if you were inside the cloud. One cool thing about this weapon is it also has a charged attack, and that will just fire over your head and prevent anyone from being able to lock onto you just from a distance. Now, that's all I have on the icons and the weapon sheets at this point. I do hope you found some of this information helpful. We will be dropping more information on all the weapons in general, along with my spreadsheet. It's been fully evolved. If you did like this video, give us a like, subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys next time.